Set 18 EDC Technical question and answers. Answers are highlighted in green. Question 1. Data entry and validation in EDC. A clinical data manager notices that an investigator is entering lab results in free format text instead of selecting values from a predefined list. What is the best approach to prevent this issue in an EDC system? Now option B says allow free text entries but mark them for review by the sponsor. You cannot allow the free text entries, especially in the lab results where you have the option of selecting from the predefined list. Option C says train site staff to enter data in a structured format without modifying the system. Now the statement is you are training the staff to enter the data in structured format. Along with it, you are not allowing to modify the system. So this is a contradictory statement, right? So this is not possible. Option D, accept feed text entries and rely on a manual data cleaning before database log. Well, the free text entries are not allowed, especially in the lab results, because that's how the structured way it is. And you cannot rely on the manual data cleaning. Say, for example, if you have more than 1,000 records, or if you have more than 5,000 records in a specific therapeutic area or a disease, it becomes very tedious and a daunting job to do the manual data cleaning, right? So that is not possible. So data cleaning should be done digitally before database log. So the correct answer is A, use edit checks that display an error when free text is entered. So that's how the data management team needs to design the database software in such a way that whenever a free text entry is done in any specific text box, an error should pop out saying that this particular value is not allowed and select from the predefined list. Question 2. User roles and permissions. A clinical trial site coordinator reports that are unable to edit adverse event data they previously entered in the EDC system. What could be the most likely reason? Option A, the EDC system is locked for data entry. No. Option C says adverse event data can only be modified by the principal investigator. Well, principal investigator has the ownership for specific EDC system, but it is not that only they can make any modification. So this is not possible. Option D says the data is stored in an external system and cannot be updated in the EDC system. Now there is no internal and external system, right? There is no such kind of concept. EDC is only one system or a software where all the data is stored. So hence this is a contradictory statement. So the correct answer is a user does not have necessary permissions to edit the AE data. So whenever you come across such situation where you're not able to edit the adverse event data, so whichever they had entered previously, in such scenario you can check out with your IT or software related concerned person whether you have required permissions or not, right? So you can ask them so that you will be able to enter the adverse event data. Question 3. Query management. During an interim data review, a CRA clinical research associate finds that a patient's blood pressure values are out of expected range. A query is raised in the EDC system, but the site staff closes it without an explanation. What should be the next step? Now understand one thing, wherever a query is raised, especially in the EDC system, the site staff cannot close it without giving explanation or without even providing the justification or without even talking or without even discussion. So that is an unprofessional kind of a behavior, like you are asking something but the opposite person is not providing any response or any justification. So that kind of unprofessional behavior is not accepted. Some or the other reason the site staff has to give. So what happens is the option B says accept the values since they were entered by the site. No, even if those are out of expected range, the CRA still has the authority to recheck the values, right? So you just can't accept it whatever, even though the site staff is not giving any response. delete the data and ask the site to re-enter. So if the site staff is not providing any response and it closes it without any explanation, that does not mean you delete the data. The site staff should be ethical enough to provide the justification for the expected range. Why it is expected range? Because they are the medical team, monitoring team, and the doctors that are there on the platform. They should easily know as to why the blood pressure values are out of range. So you cannot delete such data. Escalate the issue to sponsor immediately. Well, these are all query related, data related issues, need not be escalate the issue to sponsor unless and until it's a very kind of major risk involved in the clinical trial study. So in such scenario, what you can do is you can reopen the query and request a justification from the investigator. So this is the correct answer. Question 4. Data discrepancy management. A patient's visit date entered in the EDC is earlier than the informed consent date. What is the best approach to handle this discrepancy? Now remember one thing, whenever a clinical trial study is started, the patient's informed consent date comes first, right? It is very ethical and kind of a regulatory requirement where the informed consent date should be taken first from the patient, and if the patient is given the consent by going through all the positive and negative kind of environments after conducting this clinical trial study and after understanding the study, only then only the visit date comes. The visit date cannot come first. It's just a logical reason, right? So option B says accept the data since informed consent is just a formality. No, you cannot accept it. First comes informed consent date and then comes the visit date. So once the patient has given the consent, only then the patient will be transferred to the other kind of schedule assessments, right? Option C, manually adjust the date in database without notifying the site. No, you cannot do that. Any data that is entered in the database, you cannot manually update, manually ignore, or manually delete, or that too you're not informing to the site. So these are all our unethical practices which should not be followed. Option D is ignore the discrepancy since it does not impact the study endpoints. No, you cannot ignore such kind of discrepancies because this is a very ethical and a logic point where the informed consent date should be before the visit date. So in such scenarios, you can raise the query asking the site to correct the visit date. So the correct answer is A. Question 5. System downtime and data backup. A site reports that they were unable to enter patient data for several hours due to an EDC system outage. What is the best practice approach to ensure data integrity in such scenarios? Option A. Allow the site to enter data respectively once the system is restored. Option B. Instruct the site to maintain paper records and enter the data later. Option C, have an automatic backup and recovery process in place. So the correct answer is all of the above. So whenever there is a system downtime, the first thing is you should have the backup, and that should be the automatic process, right? You can instruct the site to maintain paper records. So you can, for the time being, you can enter the paper records and then you can enter the later. Then the site should be allowed to enter data respectively once the system is restored. So they should have that kind of facility. So the correct answer is all these three options. Question 6. Protocol deviations in EDC. During a routine data review, you notice that a site has recorded a protocol mandated blood test at an unscheduled visit. What action should be taken in the EDC system? Now, what does this mean is a patient had a specific blood test to be scheduled as per the protocol scheduled date and time, right? But that did not happen, and instead of that it was recorded under the unscheduled visit. So in such scenarios, option B says ignore it since additional tests provide more data. No, first of all, the actual protocol date value is not there, and that is being recorded in the unscheduled visit, so that is not possible. It could be a human error. So option C says manually remove the test data from the. No, you cannot do this. These are all our unethical practices which should not be done. mark the test as not applicable and proceed with the analysis. No, you even cannot do this. So you can raise the protocol deviation query in the EDC system, because the protocol mandate blood test, whenever it is recorded, it should be present in that specific scheduled visit, and it should not be entered in the unscheduled visit. So in such scenarios, what happens is you can raise the protocol deviation query in the EDC system, just to ensure whether the specific things are being done or not. So the correct answer is A. Question 7. Electronic signature and compliance. Which of the following best describes how electronic signatures in an EDC system ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 11? Option B. They encrypt all trial data for security purposes. No. They allow investigators to edit any part of the dataset at any time. No. Investigators do not have the authority to edit any data at any point of time, right? So C is not the right answer. Option D, they replace the need for source documents at the time. No. You cannot change, replace or delete or do any kind of unethical practices. So the correct answer is they provide an audit trail that captures user identity, date and reason for reason. So the electronic signatures are very important because they provide you an audit trail as to when that thing happened, who did it, and why that person did it. So those are the audit trail information, the user identity, date and the reason for change. So these are all the compliance that needs to be followed with the 21 CFR part 11. Question 8. Data lock and database freeze. A study is nearing completion and the sponsor plans to lock the database. What is the most critical step before database lock in an EDC system? Option B. Allow sites to make final data modifications after the lock. Well, this is a contradictory statement because after the data is locked, you cannot make any modifications, right? So this is a contradictory statement. So this is not the right answer. Let the statisticians decide whether the data is ready for analysis. Well, statisticians, they are supposed to do the statistical part and not to see whether when the database should be locked, right? So this is not the right answer. Option D, freeze only the primary data endpoint data while leaving other data editable. Now you cannot do this. Database is database. The database is something, whenever you're locking it, the all the parameters from screening to demographics to adverse events, medical history to labs, even the internal and external database that we receive from the various vendors, those also should be locked. It's not about only the primary endpoint, right? So the correct answer is ensure all queries are resolved and data is cleaned. Only then you can plant the database lock. Question 9. Data export and regulatory submission. A sponsor needs to submit clinical trial data from the EDC system to regulatory authorities in CDISC SDTM format. What should be the primary consideration when exporting data? Only the primary endpoint data should be exported. Well, it's not about only the primary endpoint. Whenever a clinical trial data is conducted, data is included in the analysis and entered in all phases, be it screening, demographic, every internal, external data. So we are not talking about doing only primary endpoint, right? We are focusing on all kind of data in that specific study for any therapeutic area and disease. Option C, data should be exported as is without additional formatting. Well, you are exporting it, but you are not allowing formatting. So this is again a contradictory statement. So this is not the right answer. Option D, the regulatory authority must validate the EDC system before export. Now it's none of their to see whether to validate EDC. So it is not their responsibility. So this is not the right answer. So whenever you are doing any exporting data, you should ensure that data should be mapped and converted into CDISC compliant data sets, right? So whenever you are giving or the clinical trial data to the regulatory authorities in whatever format, you should ensure that you're mapping it and you're converting it to a CDISC compliant data set. So It is not the duty of regulatory authority to ensure that your data sets are validated in EDC. They are supposed to do the review of your CDISC and the SDTM and the ADAM data. They are not there to see whether you have compliant or not compliant or validate that EDC system. If they see any major kind of issues in data analysis, or the statistical analysis is done wrong, or some misinterpretation is done, if when the data is correct and when the result is correct, so such kind of mistakes which are major, which impacts the human trial, in those kind of situation the regulatory authorities can give the response and they can make their own role. Question 10. Integration with other systems. An EDC system needs to integrate with an ePro. ePro is nothing but an electronic patient reported outcomes system to capture patient reported data automatically. What is the most crucial factor to ensure smooth integration? Option B, the EDC system should store ePro in a separate. Now there is no separate database. Whenever we are talking about the EDC, electronic data capture, it is supposed to store in specific only one database. So there are no multiple database. So this is a contradictory statement. There is nothing called as separate database. Option C, the sponsor should manually enter ePro data into the EDC system. Now there is nothing called as manual kind of entering data, right? It should be done electronically, because an ePro is nothing but your electronic one, right? So you should not do all this manual entries when you have a digital form. Option D, only high priority patient reported outcomes should be transferred. Now there is nothing called as high priority or low priority data or something like that. Any kind of data, whatever data that is captured, whatever that is seen and not seen, all those kind of data should be entered in your database. So that is what is my clinical trial data set. So D is not the right answer. The correct answer is the systems must use standardized data exchange formats. For example, CDISC ODM API based transfer. So whenever you are doing, so these are the systems that you need to follow to ensure the smooth integration, right? So the correct answer is A. Please like, share and subscribe. Leave a feedback comment mentioning any topic that you want me to make a video. Looking forward for a positive response. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. Leave a feedback comment. Many thanks for your support and having great connection.